Okay. Well, good evening, everybody. First of all, I want to thank all of our community members here who are able to join us today. I think this is a great turnout and indicative of just how concerned people are for the well-being of our community. My name is Dan O'Malley. I'm the City Council President here in Lakewood. I represent Ward 4, which is the east end of the city, and basically everything from Nicholson and Clarence to 117th Street. And I want to just acknowledge that we've got a lot of council members who are on the call on the meeting here today, including John Litton, who's our Vice President of City Council. He represents Ward 3, which is Nicholson to about Bell. Jason Schachner, who's our Ward 2 council person. Jason also, John Litton chairs our Health and Human Services Committee. Jason Schachner chairs our Economic Development and Housing Committee. And then Tess Neff, who's our Ward 1 council person, which is the West End. Councilwoman Neff chairs the Public Safety Committee. We've got our council members at large here as well. Tristan Rader, who chairs our Public Works and Sustainability Committee. Sarah Keppel, who chairs our Rules and Ordinances Committee, and Tom Bullock, who chairs our Finance Committee. I think this is really important for us today. Obviously, there have been a number of headlines in the city of Lakewood recently as it relates to safety. And I just think it was really important to bring this meeting together today so that we could hear directly from our public safety department and hear about what efforts are ongoing with our police department and other first responders as it relates to safety. You'll hear some specifics tonight as well about the some of the more major recent incidents. But obviously public safety is something that is our top priority here in the city. With all due respect to every other department, there is nothing more important than we do than providing for public safety. It's all of our jobs in the sense that we've all got to be eyes and ears every day. I'm sure that Chief Carjacking can attest to the fact that we've had on many occasions citizens who have helped out not only in solving crime, but in preventing crime. And, you know, Lakewood, despite some of these recent instances, I believe is an overwhelmingly safe city, but that's something that we have to work to maintain every single day. Everybody, but it starts obviously with leadership at City Hall. And you're going to hear today from those whose job it is every day to make sure that we're maintaining a safe community. My job as a council member and other council members here really are to serve as your liaisons to City Hall, your representatives. I'm sure I speak for my other council members as well, but I personally am making sure that I'm walking the neighborhood. I live here in the Gold Coast area, but you know, I'll walk from my house up here all the way down to Birdtown at least 2 or 3 days a week so that I'm seeing things directly. I was robbed myself last year. Unfortunately, had some valuables taken from my garage. No fun. It was violating and very unpleasant experience. But you know, it's something that we, again, need to work at every single day to make this a safe and livable community. We owe that to one another, and we as public officials owe that to you. So without any further ado, I'm going to introduce, we've got a number of folks here today. First is our Mayor and Public Safety Director, Megan George, our Chief of Police, Kevin Kauchek, and our Patrol Captain, Will Albrecht. So the Mayor is going to present today and I think has a very informative presentation for us. And then once that's over, what we'll do is I'm going to ask, just because we've got 120 some people here, and many more than that, since I see a number of people that have two people to one screen, one camera. If you could type any questions that you've got toward the end of the presentation in the chat, I'll then read them aloud for the whole group, and we'll defer to the mayor or our police leadership to answer those questions. So with that, I'll turn it over to our mayor and director of public safety, Megan George. Mayor George.
Thank you, Councilman O'Malley, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight for a very important discussion on crime in our community. The recent events are quite troublesome and something that we take very seriously. You know, many in our community don't feel as safe as they did just a few short weeks ago. I'll share that on a personal note. In my 20s, I was renting an apartment in Lakewood and was also a victim of crime where someone broke in and took some things. And I share that not for sympathy, but for context, because that experience impacts me to this day. So when we have these tragic incidents, I understand how this can rattle our community, and especially those that were nearby or witness to these events. Now, COVID has impacted and provided some challenges for all of our departments, and the police department is no different. During the first 6 months of the pandemic, I met every day with our fire and our police chief to ensure that our community would be safe. And I continue to meet regularly with our safety forces. In the police department, we had some unexpected retirements that forced us to make some difficult decisions in terms of staffing. But I want to make it clear that at no point were our patrol or supervisory duties reduced. The department has been fully funded as part of the 2020 budget, and we continue to invest in training and technology. A note on the neighborhood police officer program. 2 of those officers were retired. And since the pandemic prevented our ability to get out in the community and interact in the way that those positions were intended, we focused our efforts on ensuring that the patrol positions were fully operational, and we filled new hires in those roles. There have been some inquiries on the status of the neighborhood policing program. I just want to make it clear that the program still exists. It's currently covered with the remaining neighborhood officer, our DARE resource officers, and the special operations lieutenant in charge of that unit while we wait to put the permanent officers in place. Can we have the presentation pulled up on the screen, please? And let's go with next slide, please. Next slide as we get into the agenda. So here's the agenda for tonight. Before we get into the specifics of the recent criminal activities and the proactive steps we are taking to counter crime in our community, I think it's important to provide information on the operations of both our police and our law department. We will be specifically discussing how the police department is staffed and talk a little bit about our crisis intervention training. With that, I'm now going to turn this over to Captain Will Albrecht to discuss the operations of the police department. Will is a 26-year veteran of the Lakewood Police Department and reports directly to Chief Carjacking. He is captain of the patrol division, which is our largest division, where he oversees 11 supervisors, and there are 74 total members in that division. He recently graduated from Northwestern University School of Police Staff and Command. So with that, Captain Will Albrecht, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mayor. Everybody, thank you for having me in this evening as well. Just a little bit of a background on me, and so you can know a little bit about where I come from besides just my 26 years in Lakewood as a police officer. I have family roots that go deep to Lakewood, even though I'm myself not from Lakewood. My dad's family, when they immigrated to the United States from overseas, landed in Lakewood first on Cohasset Avenue before moving to Woodward. My mother worked at Hickson's on Detroit Avenue for about 25 years as a floral instructor. In fact, Bill Hickson, William Hickson, I'm partly named after him. those of you that have really been around Lakewood long enough, Novotny Firs, it used to be at Westwood in Detroit. That was my aunt and uncle. I had been in and out of Lakewood as long as I can remember. My wife is from Lakewood. I still have family here and have had family in Lakewood for years. It's the safety of Lakewood and Lakewood as a whole. It really is very much my existence. I've been here my entire adult life, working as the mayor alluded. I've had a few different roles in the city, and I'm not to let you know how all my qualifications, but just to let you know that I've been able to look at our safety forces from a few different angles. I served as a school resource officer. Some of you may recognize me from that in years past when I used to teach the DARE program in Lakewood schools. I served as a motorcycle officer. I served as a field training officer, training our newly hired officers as they came in. For 13, maybe 14 years, I worked as a hostage negotiator for the West Shore Enforcement Bureau SWAT team before becoming a sergeant, a lieutenant, and then a captain. The reason I think we're talking so much about what our operations are from the police department standpoint and how it's relevant with some of the events we've had lately, just to give everybody an idea of where exactly we're spending our manpower and our resources on a daily, weekly, yearly basis, and the adjustments that we've made over time. If we could go to the next slide, that would be great. First, that's actually a Lakewood policeman back from 1942, something I found in the archives, but we're not talking about the staffing then, we're talking about it now. Right now, we are allotted for 94 full-time police officers. Out of 94, we currently have 93 of those spots filled. We also have 5 part-time police officers. A couple of them are retired Lakewood officers that have come back to work in a part-time capacity. The other officers are actually full-time officers in other cities that come and work in Lakewood when they have time. Can we go back one more if you don't mind? Thanks. We also have 10 dispatchers that are on duty 24 hours, 7 days a week. We run our own dispatch unit in Lakewood. It is not run by Cuyahoga County or a collaborative unit that some other suburbs have. We have our own dispatch unit right here inside City Hall. We have 2 corrections officers that run our jail. We have 4 administrative assistants and clerks. I also left out the 3 parking attendants that we also have helping us with parking meters as well. Out of those 93 officers or 94 officers, think, okay, well, what's holding us back from getting one more officer in here right away? The hiring process is not something we take lightly, nor is it something that happens quickly. With the hiring process, I know other communities have caught a little bit of flack over the last couple of years about the thoroughness of their hiring process. I'm not aware of another department that does it more thoroughly than us. We do several rounds of interviews. We do a very thorough background investigation, a polygraph examination, let alone the physical, psychological, and drug testing that we do. And for all that to happen, it does take time. Unfortunately, often we can't replace the police officer until we know for sure that they have left. And the mayor and the chief and I talked months ago about how hiring needs to be one of our top priorities to make sure we are fully staffed as time goes on. It's an ongoing process. It's not that when we get to 94, we're going to be able to sit back and say, okay, we're all set for now. It's only a matter of time till somebody else is inevitably going to retire and leave. So it's something that we're constantly undergoing. If we could go to the next slide. That's actually the original Lakewood City Hall, which I believe was on Warren Road, from what I'm told. That's a little bit before my time. So out of our 93 officers, though, how do we break this down? Well, we have 1 chief of police, Chief Carjacking. We have 3 captains, the patrol captain, which is me. We have the investigative captain who's in charge of the detective bureau, which is Captain Wilkins. And we also have an administrative captain, Captain Stone, who oversees the civilian employees, such as the dispatchers. He's also the jail administrator for the city. It's a very big job. 4 lieutenants work for us within those 93 officers as well. 3 of them are in the patrol division under my command. 8 out of the 10 sergeants are in the patrol division. The other 2 work in the detective bureau. We have 12 patrol investigators that are assigned to the patrol unit that are in uniform every day. And then really the bulk of where our manpower comes from is right there, those 48 patrol officers. Mayor alluded that I'm in charge of about 74 people. And when you look at what's left over, it's really about 75% of the police department falls under patrol. and our ability to be able to put people out in patrol cars every day and continue to work to keep the city safe and be ready to respond to any kind of calls for service that we have. So let's go to the next slide, if you don't mind. So within those 93 officers, even though we do have 70 of them assigned to the patrol division, we have to take into account that not all of them are ready to hit the road instantly, first of all. For example, right now we have 3 officers that are in the police academy that count towards our manpower of 93 or 94 officers. The police academy in Ohio right now takes a little over 4 months, about 4.5 months. And after they're done with the police academy, then they come back and they do field training here in Lakewood. They can learn our ways of doing some different things, learn our policies, learn our streets. There's 210 named streets in Lakewood. And if you do not grow up here, I assure you, it is not easy to learn all those. Our training program in-house takes about 4 months. Also included in the 93 officers is our officers that are out for an extended period of time with perhaps an injury or an illness. They still do count against our manpower, and it's not like we can hire 5 more officers if we have 5 that are out on a long-term illness. But we have ways to be able to supplement our shifts, which I'll get into in just a minute here. The picture that you see there is from an academy class from many years ago. There's 4 Lakewood officers mixed in the bunch there. If we could go to the next slide, please. Right there is what you see. That's the bulk of our operation. And the gentleman that you see sitting at the table there, I'm mixed in there as a sergeant somewhere. This is who's responsible for responding to our calls for service day in, day out. This would be one of our shifts that we have. It's supervised by 1 lieutenant, 2 sergeants, and a mix of patrol investigators and patrol officers. This is the bulk of who we have not only go to your calls, but are responsible for the 24-hour safety and response to any kind of incidents that happen in the city. It's a group of men and women just like this. As I said, they're commanded by me. I actually usually work from 5:45 or 6 a.m. every day till about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, so I can spend some time with the night shift and then also the day shift that comes in. Helping me run the day-to-day operations within the shift, I have a lieutenant assigned to each one, and then 4 sergeants on nights, 4 sergeants on days. The sergeant's role is absolutely crucial. I like to think that they're kind of like our expert police officers that not only are they supervisors, but they're the gentlemen or ladies that our officers can go to when they have a question, wondering, how do I do this? What do you think? Get an opinion on things. They're the working folks that are really out there, really helping make a difference for us. As you can see in my third line down there, they do respond to any calls for service and conduct the preliminary investigations. When we talk about, I appreciate Mr. O'Malley saying what a priority our police department is and safety is within the city. Well, within the police department itself, the patrol division is by far and wide our priority. These are the guys that we have to make sure are out every day doing their jobs, that we make sure that we're adequately staffed to handle it. It's not to say that the detectives aren't important. They definitely are, or some of the administration, of course they are too. But it's these guys and these gentlemen and ladies that are out there making a difference 24/7. 365 days a year. I have down there that we have an average of just under 9 officers on patrol, 24 hours a day. That doesn't take into account our canine officers. It doesn't take into account our neighborhood police officers when they're available, which occasionally can help to supplement a little bit of our manpower. Sometimes we get the question of, is that really enough? Is that too much? And there's some FBI studies out there that can give you data in both directions. The way I look at it is Lorain County, where I still live now and where mostly I grew up. Lorain County's a little over 900 square miles, and about 700 square miles, maybe 650 square miles in Lorain County are covered every day just by 2 officers. You may or may not know, Lakewood is 5.5 square miles. We have 9 officers on the road just about all times, or at least an average of it. Personally, my experience has been, I feel it's adequate that we're able not only to respond to calls for service adequately that way, but we're also able to do as many preventive measures as we can, still run traffic enforcement, and still be out there in the community doing what we're supposed to be doing and interacting in a positive way as often as possible. If we could go to the next slide for a second. Right there is, oh, there he is. That's Officer McNeely. I apologize for the spelling of his last name. It came into me that way. But Officer McNeely is currently serving as our neighborhood police officer. And over the years, I was trying to do an accounting of it today. I think we've had 8, maybe 7 neighborhood police officers since we implemented the program. And about 2008, I believe, was the year. So I know there's been a little bit of talk about what about our neighborhood police officers, since we've had 2 of them retire. We have Officer McNeely right now. We actually had a 4th neighborhood police officer, Mike Fritsch, who was reassigned to the patrol division. And that was about being able to beef up the numbers in the patrol division to be able to roll those 9 officers out per shift per day. So what do our neighborhood police officers do, and what's their role in all of our operations? As you see there, they kind of work their own schedules depending upon what their needs in their community or their needs in their wards are at that time. As the summertime hours come along, we tend to have them work some offset hours, maybe a little bit more in the evenings and afternoons. A lot of times in the winter, we have them working kind of business hours so they can catch up with businesses and sometimes with the schools. Their jobs are to go out and reach out to the community for whatever the needs are. It's a little bit difficult to describe because, of course, they're police officers and they will respond in an emergency. But much of their duties, as I like to kind of think, is after the fire has been put out, they're the ones that are going to go and figure out why did the fire happen and how can we prevent a fire from happening again. That's primarily what their duties are. They respond to the council members. We typically have 1 neighborhood officer assigned to each ward. Officer McNeely right now is assigned to Ward 1 on the west end of town, but has been very helpful in performing some of the duties in the other wards as well. I mentioned at the bottom that we have our school resource officers helping out right now with the neighborhood police officer duties. Those of you that have children in school are aware that, just like the rest of the world, nothing has been normal this year. And for our school resource officers, they weren't able to teach the DARE program this year. So we were able to use some of the extra time that they had to help fill in the neighborhood police officer roles for the last several months. It's, again, as the mayor said, a position that we will be filling permanently as our manpower improves when we get some of these folks out of their field training officer programs and also out of the police academy. We're anxious to get them going too, because they definitely are a valuable asset to our operations at the police department. If we could go to the next slide, please. Apologize, I'm not used to talking so long in a row. That's Officer Smykowski there. There's a detective with us right now. Our training truly is ongoing at the Lakewood Police Department, and it comes from it teaches us a variety of skills on a variety of platforms too. It's not us sitting there and doing target shooting several times a year. By law, we are required to qualify on our pistols and our other firearms. There's other things required by the state of Ohio that we have to train on every year as well, such as what we call less lethal, such as our tasers or our pepper spray. We are required to do some domestic violence review and other training materials and subjects we bring up as the needs seem to be arise, either as we feel it's in the interest of the community or the department to educate our officers. I know this year, as I mentioned at the bottom there, we're going above and beyond, like we do every year, what's required of us by the state of Ohio, that we're going to be training on search and seizure this year, vehicle pursuits, de-escalation, which has certainly gotten a lot of publicity in the last several years nationwide. I'd like to think that at the Lakewood Police Department, we are at the forefront of teaching de-escalation. We've been doing it before it became a hot word to use in the police and law enforcement community. Let's see, there was something else I apologize I was going to mention with training. Oh, well, I don't have the data to prove it, but having been in the police business as long as I have been, I've gotten to know a lot of officers from other departments. I'm not aware of another department in the state of Ohio that does as much training as we do at Lakewood. It continues to be a priority for us to improve our officers, improve their level of education, improve their skill level. I truly appreciate the support, not only of the chief, but by mayor and city council for recognizing that it's something that we always have to have it as an ongoing task and something we can't be satisfied with. If we could go to the next slide, please. Right there, we have Officer Maestrick and Investigator Ron Bunner, who are definitely valued members of our crisis intervention team. Our CIT officers, as we call them, they're specially trained to recognize and assist people suffering from a mental health crisis. These can be people that are longtime mental health consumers, or they may be somebody that for the first time in their lives is going through a truly difficult time with a very sudden onset of a mental health crisis. And it's these specialized officers' duties to get them the resources that they need, get them the help that they need, take the time to understand what's going on with them, to help follow up, to get them wherever they need to go, whether it's to a hospital, whether it's to get them services that may not be of an emergency nature, but down the road. We're very fortunate that we were one of the most prominent departments in the state of Ohio in getting this kind of program going several years back. We currently have 27 officers that specialize in this. Our recently retired Chief Malley was recognized as the CIT officer in the state of Ohio several years back for implementing our program. In this photo, Investigator Bunner and Officer Maestrick were recognized for helping a gentleman who was going through a very serious mental health crisis and was ready to jump off the edge of a building down on the Gold Coast. And both of them talked him down from it and managed to save his life. There couldn't be anything more rewarding as a police officer than to be able to intervene in such a positive manner. If we could go to the next slide, please. So how did COVID affect us at the Lakewood Police Department? It has its challenges. I can't sit here and lie and say, oh yeah, it was perfect and we were able to go COVID free for the entire length of this pandemic. It affected us just like it affected other people with their jobs and in their lives. With COVID hitting the police department, when it first hit, we were, well, just like everybody else, we were nervous. We're worried about, is this going to wipe out the whole police department? Are we going to have to quarantine everybody within several days' time? And I think because we played by the rules and we're using due caution, we managed to keep the amount of cases that we had within the police department to a pretty good minimum. We did have absences though, and we had some retirements in this last year. I don't think they were necessarily due to COVID. I think it was some people's just time to go. And it did create some staffing issues for us. It caused us to look at where we're spending our manpower, whether it was in our detective bureau or the neighborhood police officer program. And with the support of the chief and the mayor, we realized that we really still need to make that patrol division and those officers that are out there 24/7 a priority. We never wanted to be in a position where we're saying, oh, you know what, we can only get 4 officers on the road today. We shuffled enough people around on a daily basis that we were still able to maintain that average of around 9 officers a day, 24 hours a day on the road. I can't sit here and tell you it was easy, but it was something that we got done with the cooperation of a lot of officers willing to put in the extra time, willing to trade shifts. But at no time did our manpower that we were able to put out there on a daily basis and have the ability to respond to emergencies, it never dipped below where we felt it was an acceptable level. The last slide I have as part of my presentation, if you want to go to the next one, is there's not really a smooth way to segue into this, but technology that we use at the police department now really helps support our investigative process and is really a great supplement to the manpower. I was a little surprised myself when I counted up the number of cameras in the last couple of days to find out that we have 102 of them at the city or throughout the city at different locations. We're one of our more notorious, I hate to use that word, incidents has happened in the last couple of weeks. We did have 11 cameras in Madison Park, and much of that incident we were able to get on camera and track and use that as a great aid in our investigation as it's been ongoing. I know Chief Carjacking is going to fill in everybody in on the progress of that in just a couple of minutes. Within about a half mile in Madison Park, we have 10 additional cameras. The other parks have really where the bulk of our cameras too. Lakewood Park has a large number of them, Kaufman Park. Most of the other ones that are out and about in the city tend to be on our main thoroughfares, Detroit Avenue, Madison Avenue, Clifton Boulevard. The technology on them is, for somebody like me who's not a technology person, it's very user-friendly. They are constantly recording. They have a look back period. As I say, there are 60 days that if we want to look at a past recording that might have happened last week, last month, it's easy for us to find and go back, and we can even make a permanent recording of that digitally if we want to save it to a computer or if we want to save it to a disk in any way. I don't want to give anyone the disillusion, though, too, that we're sitting there watching all 102 cameras at all times, that there's somebody sitting there clicking the buttons and trying to figure out what's going on in the city. It's more of an investigative tool that if we have something we want to look back on, we've got the ability to do so. And also that if there is something going on right that second that we become aware of, chances are there's going to be a camera nearby that if we don't see exactly what's going on, we're going to be able to see who's leaving there, what cars are leaving there, and again, use it as a great investigative tool. So there's also not a smooth segue that I have to go into the next portion of our presentation today, which is going to be to our law department. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our law director, Mr. Brian Corrigan.
Thanks, Captain Albrecht. I appreciate it. I will just give you a brief overview of the law department's role in this whole scheme here, along with the police department. And the law department's role in association with the police department is the enforcement of our laws, and with public safety being paramount, this is very important. It's an important statement that criminal activity will not be tolerated, and that there are consequences. In the law department here, we have 4 full-time lawyers. We have 2 full-time prosecutors. And on a daily basis, our prosecutors work with the police chief, the detectives, the investigators, Captain Albrecht and others, in developing and investigating and prosecuting crimes that occur within the city of Lakewood. Our prosecutors are available 24/7 to our police department to assist in investigating crimes, and in doing so in a way that is proper and obtaining admissible evidence in the court of law. You know, it's not uncommon that our prosecutors get a call on a Saturday night, on a Friday night, you know, from the police department, asking for assistance, asking for advice on how to do something and making sure that they're doing it proper. Our prosecutors are available by telephone all weekend long, and oftentimes that they are answering these questions. Prosecutor Andrew Fleck, who works closely with the police in charging cases and ultimately prosecuting these cases, is here today. Andrew has been with the staff here for close to 5 years now and is very good at seeing these cases through from beginning to end. Andy is here to go into a little bit more detail and overview regarding prosecuting and charging these cases. So Andy, I will turn it over to you now.
Thanks, Brian. Just a brief background maybe into the prosecutors you have for the city. The chief prosecutor is Miriam Miranda. She was a county prosecutor for over 10 years and 15 years in private defense work, mostly dealing with major felony cases down at the Justice Center downtown. I myself, as Brian said, have been here with the city of Lakewood for just about 5 years. Prior to that, I had 10 years law enforcement experience here with the suburban West Side Police Department. I worked while I was in law school for 1 year with the police union and 2 more years training in a West Side prosecutor's office. So you can rest assured that you have people with plenty of experience in doing the kind of things that we do on a day in and day out basis. If we have the next slide. The prosecutor's office deals with all the criminal prosecutions in the city and all the traffic prosecutions. So the criminal offenses that happen in Lakewood all come through our office. The misdemeanor offenses stay within the Lakewood Municipal Court. Felony offenses will be initially charged in the Lakewood Municipal Court, but ultimately get bound over to the county court down at the Justice Center by operation of statute. No municipal courts in the state of Ohio can hear felony cases. All they can do is determine the probable cause if the felony case exists, and then it gets bound over to the larger county courts in all counties in the state of Ohio. With the traffic prosecutions, I'm sure everyone's familiar with ticket writing and what the police do with that. Obviously, we review those cases. We try those cases as bench trials to the court in Lakewood Municipal Court. We charge cases under both the Lakewood codified ordinances and ordinances for the state of Ohio, the Ohio Revised Code. Some of the codes that we have are the same as state code. Some of the codes are unique to Lakewood, and then some of the codes are unique, obviously, to the state. So we're well versed in kind of knowing what's best to use in any particular situation. And if we don't happen to know that answer, we do have opportunity and time and resources to be able to research and get that answer in a relatively fast amount of time. As Brian said, we are on call 24/7. So we do receive calls in the evening, sometimes in the middle of the night, on weekends. That's all part of our job, things that we like doing and being involved in making sure that everything's being done in the best way that we can possibly provide. We have the next slide. In terms of charging cases, obviously the police don't call us every time they want to write a ticket. Officers are trained to do that. There are some criminal misdemeanor cases that are ticketable, and generally we can review those if they happen during the day while we're there. Generally, again, the officers are trained to be able to determine if someone stole something from a store or not, and then write the appropriate ticket. Anything that's going to be a non-ticketable misdemeanor case does get reviewed by our office. So that's going to be anything assault related, domestic violence, menacing, aggravated menacing, the whole gamut of offenses is going to come. It gets assigned first to a detective in the Detective Bureau for follow-up investigation. And then the detective will come. We have detectives in and out of our office all day long on a day in, day out basis, reviewing cases that happened that day, the day before, maybe cases that we've just gotten a more recent lead or break in the case. Hey, this happened a couple weeks ago and we finally got a person identified. You know, do we have enough now to charge? What would the charge be? All those kind of reviews. It does help a lot to have the level of technology that we have. I think Captain Albrecht spoke to that very well. It's one of the highest. I've been involved with a fair number of police departments. It's the most amount of technology I've ever encountered in terms of traffic cameras, in terms of body cameras. Even now with the advent of Ring cameras and doorbell cameras that citizens provide for us, there's no lacking in terms of ability to get hopefully suspects identified and information that maybe we forgot to ask. We can look back and check out different things. There's just a lot of availability, and it's been very helpful for our purposes in traffic trials and regular criminal trials to be able to rely on. You're not as dependent on people believing the officer's word. We have, you know, if 5 officers show up to a call, we now have 5 body cameras, all facing different vantage points, different people speaking, different parts of investigation can then all be tied together and looked at as an entirety instead of a report of an incident would maybe be written by one single officer or an officer with a supplementing officer. Now we have the availability to watch all the interaction that's happened with all the officers that are there on the scene. If I get the next slide. The last thing that our office does that's very important is the Marsy's Law compliance and victims' rights. This is a new addition to the Ohio Constitution 2 or 3 years ago. It does help us keep in contact with the victims of crimes, inform them of the court dates, ascertain if there's restitution to be paid for damages that were done, either medical bills, vehicle insurance deductibles, damage. Maybe someone broke out a window at a business, what the cost was to repair that. Someone broke down a door or punctured someone's tire, things of that nature. I'm making sure that we were able to recover those items for the victims, gathering information, and communicating with the court. So the statute also allows us to represent the victims even in court, and for the purposes of making statements, getting the restitution, weighing in on what the sentencing would be with regard to their cases. I think now we're going to turn it over to Chief Carjacking to discuss some of the most recent activities that have been going on here in the city of Lakewood. Chief.
Thank you, Andy. Good evening, everyone. I'm glad you could all attend this meeting. I'm glad to see so many faces on my phone here. I'm going to spare you a little bit of my resume and dive right into the recent criminal events and threats, which you're all here to mostly hear about anyways. So we're going to start out on March 11th. We had a shooting at Madison Park. We received that call at 6:22 in the evening. Officers were on the scene 1 minute and 16 seconds after dispatch received the call. We were able to stop the suspect, get him in custody 17 minutes after the original call. For you those of you not familiar with the incident, there was an argument on the basketball court. 3 males got into an argument over who had next game. 2 males were together. The other male was by himself. The argument continued. All the males walked back to their cars, apparently grabbed something out of their cars. 2 of the suspects began shooting at the 1 male who was running away from them. The male running away pulled a gun out of his waistband and shot back at the suspects. It's a very frightening incident because there are other people at the park, families, other people playing basketball. Everyone scattered. The person that ran away, the suspect, was actually shot in the shoulder, received a non-life-threatening injury. He was treated and released to the hospital later that night. But it turns out he's a 27-year-old Cleveland resident who is out on parole. He's not allowed to even own a gun or possess a gun by law because of his parole status. And we ended up charging him for his involvement in the shooting. Over the past day or two, we developed who the second suspect may be in this incident. And we're still working on leads to run down who the third suspect is. Right now, 1 out of the 3 males is in custody. I'm going to move on to the Metro PCS shooting that happened at 12405 Detroit Avenue. That was on March 16th at 5:57 p.m. The officers were on scene within 2 minutes and 22 seconds after they received the call. The suspect was in custody 5 minutes after dispatch received the call. 3 minutes after the officers arrived on scene, they had him in custody. What happened there is a male went into the store to get some service on his phone, which was damaged. He thought his insurance should cover it, got in an argument with the clerk. And unfortunately, the male with the broken phone pulled out a gun and decided to try and shoot the clerk for not helping him quickly enough. Luckily, the male missed the clerk when he shot. The male's gun jammed, so he wasn't able to fire additional rounds, but then he went outside the store, cleared the jam, stood in the doorway and fired 3 more rounds into a back room of the phone store where the clerk and his co-worker had fled to. Luckily, no one was hurt in this incident. The suspect in that is a resident of Robin Street here in Lakewood. It's a 43-year-old male who is also out on parole. And he is also not able to possess weapons due to his status as a parolee and prior crimes he committed. We did a search warrant on the suspect's house, and we pulled out quite a few guns and rifles out of his house that he's not allowed to have. So he will be looking at federal charges for the possession of those weapons. You're probably wondering why I'm not giving a lot of detail on this. All these cases are still under investigation. I can only give a brief overview of what's going on in these cases. Another case I'm sure you heard of was at 18500 Detroit Avenue at the Riverwood Cafe. Dispatch received a call at 8:56 p.m. on St. Patrick's Day. Officers were already on scene because it was St. Patrick's Day. We had a bar detail bar detail out in the area. So officers were there immediately, were able to give aid to the victim. But what had happened in that incident is two males who knew each other got in a verbal altercation at the bar. They decided to step outside to settle their differences. The suspect was a 35-year-old male who lives in Lakewood on Detroit Avenue. When he went to punch the 21-year-old victim, he had a utility knife in his hand, punched the victim, and ended up slashing the neck area of the victim. The victim received 16 stitches to close up his wound. And the suspect fled the area on foot, but for whatever reason, he came back on foot and we arrested him. At that time, he was arrested for felonious assault, and he was found to have a gun in his possession. So he's also charged with carrying a concealed weapon. And then the last incident I'll talk about is our carjacking that occurred yesterday. At 6:24 a.m. yesterday morning, we had an attempted carjacking at 14507 Delaware Avenue. In that instance, as the males walked up to the female's car, she began beeping her horn and screaming. They ran from the area. A few minutes later, they arrived on the Horizon Education Center at 13523 Detroit Avenue. They pulled into the parking lot for that business behind the victim, got out of the car with their guns, ordered her out of the car. When she started screaming, they struck her in the head with a rifle. They took off in her car. Most of our officers had headed up to Delaware to try and look for the car up there, not knowing that they probably passed it on the way down to Detroit Avenue, the suspect vehicle. They then changed their response, looked for the vehicle in the area, and they spotted up on Madison, the suspect vehicle. They engaged in a short pursuit, but due to heavy traffic, they quickly lost it. That car that was taken in that carjacking was recovered this morning at 1:30 in the morning on Cleveland's east side. Cleveland PD found the car, sat up on it, did surveillance, and they arrested a 17-year-old male that they had seen exit the car and then return to the car. In that short amount of time, less than 24 hours, the suspect had already tinted the windows on the car and painted the hubcaps and removed the license plate and put it on the back floor of the vehicle in an effort to change the appearance of the vehicle. Suspect was a 17-year-old male who was a Cleveland Heights resident. That same 17-year-old male's fingerprints were found in a recovered vehicle that was stolen in a carjacking on Delaware Avenue on February 15th. So we kind of connected him to two carjackings, although we can't, until we get some photo lineups and together and things of that nature, we can't really say that he was the actual participant in that carjacking. All we can say is he was in the car of the one in February. So I guess my takeaway from this, and you can take it for what it's worth, is that these are all separate incidents. I mean, it looks like a big rise in crime, you know, the sky is falling, but what really is happening is we've had some unfortunate incidents. The first one at Madison Park with people arguing over a basketball game. Who would think you would get in a shooting match over that? Metro PCS, you know, I mean, we have people get arguments with clerks every day. They normally don't shoot people. The Riverwood Cafe was on St. Patrick's Day. I'm sure alcohol was a big factor in that, where two people decided to fight and one had a box cutter in his hand. And then the carjackings, I guess we attribute that to three incidents: the attempted carjacking yesterday morning, the actual carjacking that occurred shortly after that, and the incident on February 15th. The good thing about the carjacking incidents is that we did arrest at least one of the suspects that was involved in that, and he's tied to three of those crimes that we can hopefully clear up all of those. And as long as he stays off the streets, it looks like he's responsible for a large portion of our carjackings. So the whole reason we want to have this meeting tonight, well, Mr. O'Malley wanted to have the meeting, but we came here to assure the community Lakewood is still a safe place to live, work, and play. We're actively engaged in efforts to deter and detect crime, and we also want to update you on the status of these cases. we've made arrests in all of these incidents. We still have a couple outstanding suspects, and particularly in the carjackings, there was multiple suspects in that. In the Madison Park shooting, we still have a couple outstanding suspects, but we're on our way to identifying them. I'm proud of our patrol officers' response to all these crimes, their quick response, the arrest they made, the work they did in recovering the guns and knives. We want the community to know that although we cannot control where or when a crime occurs, we can control how quickly and effectively we respond to these crimes. In these instances, I believe Lakewood Police Department's done an exceptional job. And having said that, I will turn it over to Mayor George, who's going to talk about some steps that we're going to take to ensure that the city is safe.
Thanks, Chief Kowchek, for the update on recent incidents. On the slide, you see a couple of the action steps that we're going to be taking in response to these recent incidents. The first is regarding Madison Park specifically. We are having some enhanced and upgraded lighting up there that'll assist our police department as they review camera footage of any incidents up there. Lighting can also detract some criminal activity. Installation of high-tech police cameras. As noted during the presentation, we have 102 cameras at various locations throughout the city. We continue to invest in our cameras, but we're also looking at installing some more high-tech cameras that can better assist our police department when reviewing footage to apprehend suspects. I know there's been some concerns raised about the use of cameras. I want to ensure the community this is only one tool in our toolbox, and they're mainly used as an investigative tool, not for surveillancing or monitoring people. And again, helping in the investigation when a crime does happen. And they've been helpful already in the incident that happened at Madison Park. Officer assignments to parks. We are immediately having our police officers more active within our parks. They've been instructed to get out of their cars more, to walk through the parks, to be a visible presence. We're also instituting a program that was around in Lakewood maybe 10 or 15 years ago that was funded by grants that would allow for officers in the parks during peak hours. So essentially, we'd be bringing officers in on overtime to be at the parks, to, again, walking, building relationships in the community. We're actively pursuing a grant for that program now, but now is not the time to wait for a grant to implement that program. So what I'm doing is allocating funds from other portions of the budget to fund this program to make sure that we're present in the parks during the peak hours. And then again, increased foot patrols, not just at the parks, but in our downtown neighborhoods and our community, really enhancing our efforts on community policing and being in our community. I think community policing is so important. I think that's why our neighborhood officers are important, but it shouldn't be just our neighborhood officers. It would be all of our officers building relationships in the community so that people know that they can reach out to the police department if anything does happen. And then finally, I continue to meet regularly with our chief. We discuss issues that may arise, and we're going to continue to monitor any other upticks, look at data and see where we can insert additional officers if needed, and look at other ways that we can keep our community safe. I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight in this very important conversation about safety within our community. I've said since the day I ran for city council that safety is a top priority, and that's not lip service. It truly, truly is. I believe for Lakewood to progress and to move forward and do the great things that we've done over the years, that we need to continue to make sure that we are a safe community. So all hands are on deck by this administration and this police department to make sure that we feel safe. So thank you again for being with us tonight. And I know we have a little bit of time, so we can hopefully address a couple of those questions. If we don't get to your questions, please reach out because I want to make sure that they're answered. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mayor, and to our police department and law department. Couple of questions that were right off the top here. let's see, that one was answered. That one was answered. Okay. There was a question about having patrol cars go through the paths at Lakewood Park that the maintenance trucks utilize. Is that a possibility?
I'll take that one, Mr. O'Malley. It really isn't. We would prefer to leave the pathways to the pedestrians just for safety reasons. But we do have officers that walk the park on a regular basis down there. And also at Madison Park, they're walking that park also. It's part of their duties is to get out and go on foot patrol. So I appreciate the fact you'd like us to drive on that, but we really want to keep it free for pedestrians.
Okay, great, thank you. Let's see, another question. With the temporary shortage of neighborhood police officers, what can we expect over the summer months? We currently have one neighborhood officer to cover 4 wards. What's the plan to keep this essential program moving forward while others are being trained?
Yeah, I'll start that. And if Chief, you want to pick up anything I missed on that. So just regarding the staffing, I think we mentioned during the presentation. So we do have McNeely in Ward 1. We do have the 2 DARE resource officers that are available as well as the lieutenant in charge of that special operations unit. So they are available as well and are actively doing the roles of the neighborhood officers until those assignments are permanently filled.
Okay, thank you. Have any alternatives to increase surveillance and policing been considered? I believe that investing in the community's needs as far as health and education is a more restorative path forward. I don't think they're mutually exclusive, but I'll defer to the mayor and anybody else that wants to talk about that.
I'm sorry, Councilman, can you repeat that? My phone cut out
Sure.
first.
Have any alternatives to increase surveillance and policing been considered? I believe that investing in the community's needs as far as health and education is a more restorative path forward. Increased surveillance seems like a solution out of fear rather than community care and is harmful to people of color in our community.
Yeah, I think we continue to also invest in our human services department. I'm sure you've heard of the Cove Church project. That's a really transformational project where we bring in all the different divisions with under human services under one roof. We've also had talks with Metro to bringing in a mental health component as well, so that we can really address the mental health needs of those in our community. So you're certainly right. This is multifaceted. Some of the things we talked about today is direct police work, but you're absolutely right. Education, our human services department, mental health services are very important to us as well.
Another question is about whether we have a pursuit policy. Does a violent crime like an armed carjacking and assault with a deadly weapon warrant pursuit of fleeing suspects?
Yes, we do have pursuit policy. And yes, that would warrant pursuit. Anyone that threatens someone else with a gun is obviously going to be a danger to the community in general. So that is something we would pursue for, although I would say we would temper that also. I mean, if he goes blowing through a school zone with kids walking through it at 60 miles an hour, we may call for a pursuit for the greater good and say that we'll get that person another day. But in general, if it happens in the evening hours where pedestrian traffic is light and traffic is light, we will definitely pursue that person.
Another question is, are we consulting with other jurisdictions about best practices to address our specific issues? Obviously, we're bordered by City of Cleveland on 2 sides of the city. Chief, can you talk a little bit about our coordination with Cleveland?
Yeah, we have a very good relationship with Cleveland. We speak to all their detective bureaus and their special units, their gang units. And until recently, we had a couple officers on a federal task forces that we withdrew to put more officers on the street, but we were on the U.S. Marshals Violent Fugitive Task Force for many years. And also we had an officer on the FBI drug task force that we pulled back just so we get more bodies on the street. And yeah, we coordinate with Cleveland on a daily basis. Usually their crimes spill into our city and our crimes spill into their city. So we have a very good relationship. And like I said, Cleveland's the one that caught the one carjacker last night and recovered that car for us. So we're very thankful to them for that.
Great, thank you. Let's see, does the city have any programs in place like peer mediation, conflict resolution, and emphasis on community service that might help curtail possible violence? Director Corrigan, I know that we have a free mediation program. Maybe this is a good opportunity to plug that for feuding neighbors.
Thank you, Councilman. We do have a free mediation program. It's typically not criminal related. It's civil related. It's for disputes, oftentimes between neighbors when they are unable to come to a resolution of a dispute. But as far as a mediation program with criminally, that typically would come through the courts and maybe through the probationary department of the court.
Thank you. Next question, is there any progress on the carjacking at Arthur and Athens? I don't know if we discussed that one.
I believe that was late last year, and I would have to check on that. I am not at the office right now to see what the status is.
Okay, Deborah, if you'd like to reach out to me, and I'd be happy to follow up on that. Let's see, next question. There's a question about basketball generally, and I'd like to take that one. I support basketball at our parks. I think it's an important program. We have worked very hard to maintain those courts, and I feel like getting rid of the basketball courts seems like a surrender to me, frankly. You know, we've got a lot of kids in our community who enjoy that. And I think to take that resource away from them when it's being responsibly and safely enjoyed by 99.9% of the people who utilize them is unfair. And frankly, I think a bit of a, I think we can be a lot more creative and work a little harder than just ripping the hoops down. So I would not support that. I would support keeping them up and again, doing a lot of the things that we've discussed tonight to make them safer. Okay, let's see. And jumping around a bit because some of these have been answered. What is our police force doing in regards to the constant car break-ins in Lakewood? Not carjackings, but actual break-ins.
So our officers are constantly on patrol. We do constantly arrest people for doing that. It's an easy crime. It's a crime of convenience, you know. And especially with COVID, with people staying in their houses and with the bars closing early, you know, when they did have the bar curfew, come 10 at night, we did have a lot of break-ins because there was no one out, no cars, no pedestrians. I think we've seen a slight downturn in that now that the economy, the bar economy, as well as other things are kind of opening up a little bit with vaccinations coming through. But we do investigate all of those. We dust for fingerprints. We take DNA swabs. We do whatever we can to try and identify who is responsible for that.
Next, also, what is being done to curb speeding, especially on Clifton Boulevard, but all over the city? Captain Albrecht, is that one for you?
Every day we review twice a day to see what the most recent complaints we have are of speeders. We deploy our officers to run radar at times. I know, Mr. O'Malley, I've worked with you about getting some speed signs set up in areas that we believe may be a problem. If we recognize that there's something ongoing with a problem, we'll even arrange to do a speed survey to we've talked about this to see if there's other traffic calming measures that need to be taken. So far as Clifton goes, I know I've regularly signed, or daily, twice a day, have assigned patrol cars to enforce the speed limits of the Emerson school zone, which I feel is problematic in that there's a lot of traffic down there and a lot of children. And we've had some success curtailing that. We cited several cars right off the bat, and we've seen the speed violations actually get curbed a little bit here recently too.
Yeah, and I know the city invested last year in, I know Councilman Litton, who I believe is on here, prioritized this in our budget, getting several dozen new speed radar monitors that are solar powered, and appreciate Captain. Just we had a resident emailed me the other day and said wanted one on beach, and the police department got it up the next morning. So those have been really helpful. There's a concern from our, one of the questions that was posted on behalf of our anti-racism task force mentioned some concerns about surveillance and its impact on privacy and profiling. Mayor, I know you talked about those cameras are really being used more after the fact to solve crimes that have already occurred than surveillance, but can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's essentially how we use the cameras within our community. They're not used for monitoring current situations. They're really used as a tool for our investigators to look at any sort of crime that did occur.
Thank you.
If I could chime in on that real quick, Dan.
Sure.
So the cameras were used in the shooting we had down at the cell phone store. We had a camera in the area, and we were able to see the suspect drop his gun down a sewer grate, which we were able to recover at a later time. We were able to see which street he cut up, so we get our officers up there to actually find that guy when he went to hide in the backyards. And a lot of times we use our cameras when there's a traffic accident. We'll have two people saying, you know, I had the right of way, and the other person said they had the right of way. We can go back in those traffic cameras and see who was actually at fault in the accident, whether the light was red or green or yellow, you know, and that's really how we use them, more as an after the fact type thing.
Thank you. This is a comment. It is essential that the city's response be community driven and considered through an equity lens. What we're seeing in Lakewood is part of a national trend in escalating gun violence. The reduction in access to social services combined with easy access to guns during the pandemic suggests that we need to identify high-risk individuals through law enforcement / social agencies and establish and fund local gun violence intervention programs. Thank you, Marianne. Let's see, good news about your plans for the parks, but can you also increase the presence of officers near 117th Street? I'm sure that we're patrolling there and giving it due attention. Any Captain or Chief, do you want to?
Sure, Mr. O'Malley, that the 117th Street is definitely one of our main thoroughfares, and it does get a great deal of attention. As someone who used to try to run radar there, it's not a prime location for being able to do that, I'll admit, but regularly we have presence there. Not only daily, hourly, almost by the minute. We have 2 officers assigned to that end of town 24 hours a day to the east end, and 117th Street is often a big part of their focus.
Thank you. Let's see. Keep going. Just about at the bottom here. Okay, how does the city and the police department communicate with the public about specific incidents, ongoing trends, and areas of concern, as well as community programs? Where should members of the community go for timely information? It seems that a lot of folks look to community social media groups where rumors abound due to a lack of consistent official communication.
Yeah, I can chime in a bit here. We do have a page on the city website, on the police department. Also, my office can always be contacted with questions. You know, it's hard to comment on ongoing investigations. That's why at times I am maybe short and to the point on a lot of things. It's because in talking with our law department, we don't want to say anything that could hinder the prosecution of these cases. So when we can, we do issue a statement, but that's not the case at all times.
Thank you. Yeah, and you know, I know personally, I remember the night of the shooting at Madison Park, I was really trying to get out in front of some of these things because there were rumors all over the place. And so, you know, I would certainly agree that we need to make sure that we're providing factual information to sort of stop some of those rumors right when they start, because it's they're not helpful.
Yeah.
Sure.
I'll also add, Councilman, you bring up a good point. Our police department does typically provide a press release on some of these matters once they happen. So I would rely on information from the officials rather than what may have been heard on a social media community page, because rumors can certainly spread. So please rely on the press releases from officials.
Okay, yes. Seems like the speed tables on Marlowe have curb speeding. That's very good. Dan, where can I get one of those pens? Yeah, these, I used to use these in grade school all the time and still have a few. I'm sure they still make them. Let's see. We've got time for just a couple more. And by the way, if we don't get to your question tonight, every single one of the questions, this chat is being saved. So every single one of these comments will be read. I'll make sure that they're forwarded on to the appropriate person, because we've got some folks that are asking about, you know, resources in the parks, et cetera. But also our email addresses are all public record. You can go on the city's website. They're on there. We're happy to answer questions. Again, I am out walking my ward during the day and in the evening, as I'm sure all council members are. So don't hesitate to reach out to us. And I know the mayor's office is very responsive as well. Let's see, I think we got time for a couple more comments. John Litton, go right ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just quickly, I don't want to pass up on an opportunity, and thank you to everybody who's shared both questions and the mayor and her administration, as well as our police department for, I think, providing a thorough update on things and with plenty more work to be done. But I never want to pass up an opportunity to also plug the idea of block clubs, block watches, and that sort of thing. There's some amazing groups throughout our city, including Ward 3, that I think really do a nice job of at least keeping people informed when there are issues and things like that. And so if you are interested in helping start and maybe even leading a group, everybody likes the idea of block clubs. No one necessarily has the time to devote to it. But if you would like to consider that for your neighborhood, I'm sure your ward council person would help, as well as John Story, the chief of staff for the mayor, is also very helpful in getting you started on your own block watch, block club, if you'd like to do that. Thanks.
Good point. There have been some questions, Chief, about what the department does to diversify the police force and recruit maybe underrepresented folks to join Lakewood Police. Well, what is our process for recruiting officers to join the team?
In the last couple of years, police departments across the country have seen a big decrease in people applying for police jobs. A lot of that is due to some incidents that have occurred, and also the fact that they're underappreciated. They're constantly under fire. So for instance, when I got hired, back in 1989, I took the test at Lakewood cafeteria with 650 other people. Our most recent test, I believe we have about 65 people on our list, and it wasn't just our test. It's a national testing agency that puts that on, that you can apply to 3 or 4 different agencies by taking one test. You can basically apply as many agencies as you want across the nation by taking one test. So people who applied for us also applied for Cleveland and Solon and Strongsville and Middleburg Heights. So we're all fighting over the same pool of applicants. And I'm sorry to say that our pool has shrunk significantly over the years. We are looking to hire minorities and we're looking to hire women. We just don't have a whole lot in our applicant pool at this point. So if you know anyone that would like to apply, please encourage them to do so at Lakewood. We generally test every year or two. We currently have we have a list ongoing now. And we take laterals also. So if you know a minority or any minority candidates that are police officers at other agencies, they can apply for us and come directly over to the department.
Thanks.
But that's about the best answer I have.
Okay. Last question on here and again, I do apologize for those whose questions we didn't get to. I promise you, Maureen, our council clerk, who works very, very hard, by the way, I should have acknowledged her at the beginning. She put a link in here where it has all of the contact information for everybody on city council. And then the mayor's office, I think, is just mayor@lakewoodoh.net. But it was asked about what block clubs do to deter crime. I know we've got a number of block clubs here that meet regularly, that talk about things that are going on in the community. And I just think that neighbors knowing each other better is going to lead to better collaboration and communication between neighbors to deter crime and to solve it after the fact. So if you are interested in starting a block club, we have resources available at the city to help you do that. I know that all of the ward council members and council members at large would be interested in helping you as well. So Mayor, any final thoughts here before we wrap up? I'm trying to be respectful of community members' time, but again, we'll keep the conversation going after tonight. I thought this was good.
Yeah, I again just want to thank everybody for being on the call this evening. Again, as I had mentioned, this is a very important topic in our community, and I wanted you to know that our police department is on top of it. And I know there's quite a few questions about mental health services, and we do have a strong human services department. It's provided challenging through COVID, like everything else. We have caseworkers that have had trouble to getting into people's homes, but luckily as the vaccinations increase, we're able to get down to doing what we do, which is meet with people where they are. So thank you for your comments and looking forward to continued discussions.
Thank you. Let's see. I want to thank everybody. You know, we are going, I know this was originally billed as a Birdtown discussion, but with all the things that have gone on, I thought it was important to make sure that we expanded this to the whole community. If there are Birdtown residents on here, we do want to start a refreshed Birdtown block club. And so do email me if you'd be interested in joining that effort. I know that there are active block clubs on Clarence and Friends of Madison Park group, et cetera, but we'll have a better, we'll have a broader committee that I think would be really good to get going. So feel free to reach out to me. Again, I know that there are some that didn't get their questions answered. We had a very limited amount of time and over 150 people here tonight. So good problem to have, I guess, but we'll keep the conversation going. Thanks, everybody. Really appreciate all of your time and for taking such a strong and important interest in our community.
Good night.
Bye-bye.